Good afternoon, Michael Martin.
How's it going, Mike?
Good. Where are you? What are you doing? What day is it?
I
What's going
wish I
on?
knew. What am I doing? I just smoked some bacon. That's what I did.
Okay.
Just brought it in the house.
From a
How
pig
about
you
you?
pastured, or did you purchase a pig a few weeks?
No, this is,
What was the life history of the pig?
well, it was from a couple different ones, I think. It was,
Okay.
because what happened? So last week I shot a deer.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I had to
How
make room
big
there
on your property? Tell us a little bit about the hunt.
on my property. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, well, I was actually almost the last day of muzzleloading season. And I was kind of, I've been not totally into it like usual because I got disrupted a couple
Uh-huh.
times. But one night I went out a week ago Friday. I went out to drop out. I figure I'll go the next day since I'm almost out of time
Hmm.
and drop some carrots in my bait pile. And it was a beautiful full moon, and I felt good. So
Hmm.
went in the house, went to read a little bit, went to sleep. Morning I got out there and I went to bend over. It's still dark, and I bent over by the bait pile to see if there anything had been there, and they were almost all gone. And
Okay.
then I stood up, and a deer, I don't know, like maybe 15 yards away, I could see it. It was still dark, but I could see its shape in the trees.
Okay.
Run, and I said, "Oh well, I just blew it." So, but I said, "I'll just go in because it was really cold." I said, "I'll go into my deer blind till it gets cold, and then I'll go in the house." And I didn't think
Okay.
anything would happen, but the deer came back in 10 minutes.
Really? Same one.
Yeah. Same, I'm sure it was the same one.
Yeah.
And
Interesting. And would
and
be
we
go ahead, continue.
no, we hung it for a few couple days, and we butchered it. I think it was on Monday.
Okay.
Maybe
And is the carrots, is there a lot of smell to the carrots, or is it more or less they're kind of moseying around
no, they
trails
smell.
that they're okay.
Deer have super sensitive sense of smell.
Okay, that's their big thing.
So you or I might not be able to smell it from a couple hundred feet away, but the deer certainly can.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I had to make room in the freezer after I cut it up, and that's when I found a forgotten pork belly from a small pig.
Mhm.
And I found a couple jowls I forgot about. And you can make bacon from jowl meat, which is actually a really good kind of bacon.
Okay.
So that's what I did. So some of my kids are getting bacon for Christmas in their
Nice.
Christmas goodie bag.
Would you give them it's like a 3 pounder maybe?
Well, probably at least a pound,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe two.
Okay.
I mean, the jowls are not. I mean, they're big, but they're not huge. So I think I'll cut
So
one.
from these parts that were in your freezer, did you have
Mhm.
to do anything? What prior to the gifting stage where they're going to
Oh
cook
yeah.
it? What else did you have to do other than like slice it in a certain way and
Well, I
trim
didn't.
it from the bone? Just trim it from the bone.
No, it was already cut up into
Okay.
pieces like that. What I had to do was season it. I had to cure it.
Okay.
So I started curing it. Let's tell you something. So probably 6 days ago, 5 or 6 days ago.
Uh-huh.
They let it cure in the refrigerator, which is a cure is made from salt, sugar, pepper. This one threw some cayenne in there. I don't know if they put
Hmm.
anything else in there. I mean, you can put it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Um, I also made some from the venison. I made some breakfast sausage, which I seasoned with salt, pepper, and maple syrup and brown sugar.
And
It's
that
kind of
maple syrup is presumably from a tree. Oh, yeah,
it
we have
was
a
not
friend.
that was not ours.
Michael,
It
we've
was
almost
local.
never met members of your family, but you have a visitor. Oh, this is great.
Better go,
Ladies and
sweetie.
gentlemen, it's the Christmas episode of the Regeneration Podcast, and we have a visitor.
Go see your mom. Your mama likes that. Go ahead, sweetie, go. Go see. There we go.
That's great.
Our special guest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember on early YouTube, there's crazy things like Double Rainbow all the way and like Baby Monkeys. But then even
Mhm.
after YouTube, we had seen most everything. There was the whole world fell in love with this newscaster who had a very serious gig, but he was doing it from home. And his daughter came in, you know, and
Oh,
the
I
guy
remember
was
that.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, that just captured, it certainly captured me.
Well,
I think it was a
people act
COVID
like it's
thing too,
all.
right? Yeah.
People act like people aren't doing this from their actual houses, and there's life going on there, right?
Right, right, right. Yep. That cracked me
So,
up.
so what are you doing to get ready for Christmas at this
Yeah,
point?
it's
Like,
interesting. I think Amy and I were more or less commenting with four, our youngest living not far from here lives with some of his friends. That's Aiden. He was on the podcast once. We'll have him again on. He's still into this Jordan Peterson thing, not just into it like as a fandom. He just considers himself, and he is. He has a lot of interesting things to say. Like he's read the whole corpus. Most people don't finish Maps of Meaning. I myself read probably half of it, skipped the back third, and then finished the really the penultimate thing. The final chapter is a tour de force. It's really dense, and Aiden's theory on it is there's so many misspellings in it and like typographical errors
really?
is that even the editors didn't get that far. Is it you know the trade? Is that a possible theory?
No,
Okay, it's not a possible theory. Any which way you
I
shake
don't
it
know.
or
It
bake it.
depends who published it. Who published that book? Let me look it up.
It's the paperback version, but it's thick. Maps of Meaning.
Who
But
published it?
um I could probably
I think
look it
he
up
had a
on some.
major publisher, right?
I don't know. This was before the 10 Habits or whatever book that launched his career.
I'll tell you,
Maps
because
of Meaning.
different publishers have, especially independent publishers, have different
Yeah.
editing policies.
Well, I think Aiden would say, and again, I'm probably wrong on all of this. We'll have him on as he, I think he originally thought that book would be, he'd said everything, so necessarily it would be successful. But obviously, it wouldn't be because it's very, very deep. Um,
Well,
and
he's a
maybe he was,
smart guy.
very, very
I
sharp.
mean, when
This
he
thing is
talks about when
tough.
he
This thing is
stays in
tough.
his lane and talks psychology, and
Yeah.
I don't think he can be beat.
And this book is a reflection of that. It's super comprehensive.
Well, here it is. Let me see who's the publisher.
Yeah.
Architecture of Belief, published by.
If Aiden was here, I'd have him pop on for an update of
Wow,
the whole Jordan
wow, what's
Peterson
surprising. I
phenomenon.
thought it was
Tell
a
me.
major publisher. It was published in 1999 by Routledge.
Okay.
Rutledge, or how it's pronounced. But that's one of the biggest academic publishers on the
Okay.
planet in English language, and I can't
I
believe they would do such a
I
crappy job of
mentioned that
editing.
I read the last chapter and I read good portions and I found a lot of I just mentioned it to him and he nodded because he had seen a bunch himself. In that last chapter, I think it's loaded with them. Any
Wow.
conceivable way that they like before AI that somebody literally didn't read from a good publisher the last chapter or so. I don't think I'm
That
making
well,
this up. I don't think
I
I'm
mean,
making this up. I remember
no,
it. Yeah.
but you're not. But the thing is, with editing and publishing, stuff always gets through, right?
Yeah, just the
There's always
occasional
going to be
thing.
something, but it's usually not. Um, you know, Usually it's not even that noticeable. It might be like one, a couple typos or something,
I'm
and it's
thinking
still
there was
good.
10 or 15 biggies. And
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, I hope to be proven wrong. I hope to be proven wrong, but I think so. You're saying not like we're on to a huge like heist or something,
The
but it's
Jordan
noteworthy.
Bros
I
are
just thought
jump
I
all
just
over.
loved Aiden's theory that it's so dense, that book. It really is. He wants to, it's almost like that left brain of his, how we look at Jordan Peterson as like the most left brainiac wannabe
Yeah,
right brain, left brain, left brain, left brain guy. And
yeah, 564 pages. That's a long book.
yeah, yeah, and he just didn't want to leave any. There was no, she, the divine feminine, even though he was ostensibly on the hunt for her, there was going to be no place that he wasn't going to invade with his Jordan Peterson light, is one way of looking at it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Well, it's
he's really
interesting because that book,
powerful.
1999, came out.
Yeah,
That's like 100 years before anybody ever heard of Jordan Peterson.
yeah,
So that might have been, I don't know the history of it. It might have been a draft, version of his dissertation.
yeah. Have
I
you
don't
read
know.
reviews of the new book?
Well, it's hard, since he became a phenomenon. It's hard to read anything that's not biased, either pro or against.
I think that's a good insight.
You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
try to, and I know what I know his thing. I've seen a lot
Uh-huh.
of his videos. Um, but speaking of Jordan Peterson, so when he first
Yeah.
popped on to everybody's radar, which is like 6 years ago.
I saw him live in that during that whole phenomenon.
Oh, did you?
I went to Kodak Hall. I took Aiden and a buddy and my wife.
And
And it
well,
was cool. But I also
was
had problems with it, which I'll mention, like a
yeah,
serious one,
which
but go
is
ahead.
now that was before COVID, right? Yeah,
Probably. You tell me.
probably
Yeah.
because maybe I don't know if it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, because he came to people's attention when he refused to use ridiculous pronouns for students.
Yeah, this was after that. This was after
Right.
that, but I think
But that's
his
when
there were,
that's when he showed up on everybody's radar, right?
and also with that book must have been almost in pre-publication, not to say in any way that he faked his heroism at the campus level.
No,
But I forget which came first, the book or
no.
his kind of rise to fame.
His rise to fame
That's
came
cool.
first.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, before the last one, right? Before the pull your pants up and walk straight book, whatever that is.
It's embarrassing for both of us to be talking about him without knowing much. Yeah, we should have, I could have Aiden on
I can't remember,
sometime
kids
and
can't
yeah.
remember the book.
But we
But
both agreed
but
that he's significant. Yeah.
but when he showed up on the radar, so a friend of mine at the time had a online like a news website.
Hmm.
And in fact, I just saw him last week. He had lunch with him, and he asked me,
Is this somebody I
hey,
know?
you heard about this Jordan Peterson thing? You think you could write something about it? I said, well, yeah, sure, I've heard about it, but okay, all right. And so I investigated it. I wouldn't call it necessarily a deep dive, but I was looking into the controversy surrounding him,
Hmm.
and especially what was bothering me is people, that used to be at least tangentially associated with the radical Catholic reimagination of everything. We're all down on him. They were like, "This guy's just
I'm trying to think of who you're thinking about in
Well, I'm
particular.
thinking of what
We
Arthur
don't
Ross
need to name
was
names.
one of
Okay,
them.
yeah,
Rossman was one of them. Sam Rocha, who drives me nuts. He was one of them.
yeah.
And stupid, what's his name? Henry Carlson. That
Okay.
whole uh Pathos crowd, or yeah, I think it's
Uh-huh.
Pathos, right?
Yeah.
Those guys who all went to Steubenville and are suffering from Oedipal rage because of it. They were letting Jordan Peterson have it. And I couldn't. And when the guy asked me to take a look at it, I'm like, he doesn't seem like this is outrageous. It seems like what normal professors used to do.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I
Challenge
mean?
assumptions. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's that. I didn't see what the controversy was because he
Yeah.
was acting like a professor. I mean, at least
Hmm.
that's well. Here's why I didn't see what it's a problem because that's how I act like in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't know what the big deal was.
Yeah. No, we're on this total same page there. Total same page.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says.
No, and right now I shouldn't. It's again an embarrassment for me to go for at all of a deep dive without kind of letting more experienced people in the know in. But he's in a very tight relationship with Ben Shapiro, which is very questionable to a lot of people right now. He kind of it's almost like he signed the death warrant with like neoconservative ink, I
Yeah.
think is a storyline with him. Um, Again, Aiden, you had a good insight that everybody has an opinion for or against. So I think FPR put out a review of his book by somebody, and I have every reason to believe it was good. But Aiden had read it before I did, and then there was another review, and he said there's only been um, two that he would think would really kind of pass muster, seem fair in any way, but also sees problems himself with the book. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, but I'm the same with anybody. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say how much I track with Jordan Peterson, but it's probably comparable to how I track with David Bentley Hart.
yeah,
You know, I agree with them more than I disagree with them, but I don't always agree with either one of them, right?
yeah, both cases for me as well.
It could be 60 or 70% I agree.
Hmm.
And the thing is, and this is it's an interesting thing in our culture, is that um we're a culture that emphasizes on the areas in which we disagree,
Yeah.
that we agree. Now, one of my favorite quotes, I don't know if I can find it, but it's in this book right here. 2 volumes. Coleridge,
Spark and Coleridge's
biography.
Biographia Literaria. Yep.
That's right. And
Yeah.
in there, and this is my
I could
And
never get through that whole thing so far in my
oh, it's,
life, but I'll
it's
go back.
like
Yeah.
notes. It's not really like
It's
a whole
really,
like
really difficult. Yeah.
it's well, it's difficult, but it's always interesting.
It is. It is. Everything he ever
And
thought, did, or said was interesting.
kind of my guiding principle for doing literary criticism comes from him. And this is
Okay.
my kind of approach to most things in the intellectual world. And he says, yeah, you know what? He says, anyone who tells me that there are defects in a work of poetry or literature is not telling me anything I couldn't figure out for myself.
Right, right, right.
But if you show me what's illuminating in that work, then you're doing me a favor. Then you're helping.
Agreed. Agreed.
And that's my approach to Jordan Peterson and David
But
Bentley.
but an interesting one that doesn't split the difference on that, but is the effect of crowds, right? So crowds is my biggest theological interest right now. That salvation, soteriology, so would say this, and I'm just bringing it up because it's a name I've mentioned many times now. This Christos would say, and I was thinking about this before I discovered his work over at Front Porch Republic. I was writing essentially the same thing, which is that salvation is being rescued from a crowd in our time. The distinction between a community and a crowd formation. So vis-a-vis people like Jordan Peterson, vis-a-vis in recent conversations I've had in Catholic church circles, people like
Yeah.
Bishop Barron, people like Father Mike Schmitz, the effective crowds, my dearest Father Ed
Right.
Dillon, who we've had on the show, would look at his friends. He had a highly, highly trained mind. But the biggest thing he could say about some of his friends is like that dimwit didn't have the good sense to shake his following. So we have this image of a Saint Vitus dance or some infernal, where the crowd shapes the person as much as the person shapes the crowd, and
Yeah.
then they fly off into the netherworld. And is Jordan Peterson kind of caught up in that nexus?
I think so.
Yeah.
At least he was. I mean, maybe he still is. I don't know, but I think that's the danger. In fact, I can't remember if I wrote about this recently or not.
See, we never talk about scale in this world anymore. It's always like left or right, big idea, and everything's so disembodied from the body that the scale, they say the scale of a deer or a mouse couldn't work beyond a mouse's size because it only works within a certain limit. A
Right,
human being, we're obsessed with these monster movies, but scale is so important, so vitally important to this. And so scale is related to crowds in some way. When we talk about politics, scale has to
right.
be vitally important.
Well, and I think, I don't think this is necessarily um this is probably intrinsic to human nature, right?
Mhm.
And we want to be liked. So, but the danger with social media and things like that is you turn yourself into a product, to a brand, right?
You have to.
And then you feel you have this kind of unspoken obligation that weighs upon you to perform according to expectations, right?
Yes, which is the
Yeah.
official editorial line of the Regeneration
But
podcast.
that goes through anything. I mean, I think that I see that in psychotherapy.
Mhm.
I think, and actually, I think our listeners probably know I used to be an astrologer, and I stopped doing it because two things. I realized people were placing way too much responsibility on me, and not doing their own, doing their own work.
Sure,
But
sure.
the other part of it, it goes the other way, and I think this happens in social work or psychotherapy, is that then the other part of it is, wait, if this person gets his head together, I'm going to lose a customer.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I
that's
mean?
the whole concept. That's Illich's critique of the church. And then vis-a-vis the church, that thing, this is the vital critique of all contemporary society. Then it got picked up by schools and hospitals. All three, in their current institutional forms, are dying in our time. And we need to talk about scale. We need to talk about scale. And this institutional model, do we need to sit in square rooms for these things? But do you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah. And the other
Yeah.
thing is that I mean,
This kind of passive
the idea
receptive
of
model. Yeah.
crowds has blown up exponentially.
Say that again. The idea.
This idea of what constitutes a crowd
Yeah, sure.
has blown up. It used to be
Yeah.
your department at work or in the college, or you know what I mean. It was much
Mhm.
smaller. Now it's the world. It's the internet, right?
Mhm.
And but
Good
here's the
insight.
thing, right. I mean, Freud was writing about this 100 years ago, more than 100 years.
Social Psychology and the Ego is a great
The
book, by the
mass
way.
psychology of crowds. I think that
Another
no, it
great
was
one.
I don't know if it was him. And then Wilhelm Reich, his student,
Sure.
wrote, I think in the 40s or 50s, right after World War II, I think, uh, the mass psychology of totalitarianism, or however it's
Yeah, yeah,
phrased.
yeah.
And I just actually, I just wrote on my Substack last week about practical magic, meaning how for practical magic comes from my experience as a Waldorf teacher.
I was going to say this was an excellent essay. I wrote you about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to unpack the whole thing here, but the idea is, as a Waldorf teacher or as a parent, you are actually doing magic onto the children
I will
because
link to
you're
Michael's
using
Facebook
your will
Substack at
to
the thing.
influence
Yeah.
them, right? You're using
Do it.
your
Yeah.
will to influence them.
Right.
That's what magic is, right? Now you're doing it in a benevolent way, and hopefully you're a good person. Not everybody is, as a parent or as a teacher, especially a school teacher. A little bit different when you're teaching college. Um, but and it's a hard thing to do because of those things, because you're personally involved. But the other thing is the same methods are used by advertising and political manipulation and propaganda. It's the same method because um and you can tell on so what and I don't want to unpack the whole thing, would take us hours, but this what's Rudolf Steiner calls the astral body, or what Aristotle and Aquinas would have called the animal soul, right? Which is the part of the soul in which that we share with the animal kingdom, which Aristotle would say we have the animal soul has movement and desire,
Even
right?
if it's flight or fight, for our
Yes.
people who are into
I mean,
Darwin, sure,
plants
these
don't
things.
have flight or fight, right?
Yep, they
Plants
just
don't
don't have
run
it.
away.
Yep. Yep. Or even
Animals
the
do.
growling of teeth, a little bit of this. Yep.
Yeah. But
Passions.
also,
Yep.
you know, as the medieval philosopher said, what love calls us to the things of this world. It's eros, right?
Yep.
And eros and all those things. Eros, whether it's hate or love, love or strife, right? Heraclitus.
Yep.
Um, those are the things that are employed by the makers of propaganda to assert their control over populations. So you go back, I think it was 2 years ago now. This is going to be the winter of death and disease for the unvaccinated. Remember that one? It didn't
Yeah,
pan
I
out.
remember that one. I
It was
remember
a,
that one.
it was a crap attempt at manipulation. I don't think it worked on too many people. But that's the kind of thing they do but we go back to the early days of the pandemic, right? All
Yeah.
the slogans that appeared, right?
Mhm.
Safe and effective, or keep everyone safe, or you're gonna kill grandma, right? So it's
Those are
all these
crowd
things that
formations.
work
Those are
on the
crowd,
emotion.
yeah, crowd mantras, crowd chants, crowd.
But those,
Yep.
yeah, but those work on the emotions, on the
Mhm.
feeling realm. This is the animal soul,
Mhm.
right? Or the astral body. But the thing is, it works from a step above that constitution, and from what Steiner calls the ego, or kind of the grown-up self, or the spirit soul, right? That that its properties are rationality, imagination, and memory, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you go from that direction, that's how you work as a teacher on, like, say, teenagers, right? Whose astral bodies are just coming in at puberty, right? They're nuts. So your job as a teacher is to be the authority. And not only because you know your stuff, you know your job, but you instill discipline
Mhm.
and form on the kids, which and they might not respect it, but you're doing them a great favor, right? But you got to, and that's why it's hard to do, because you have to have a strong ego to be able. And I don't mean ego like self-centeredness. I mean the way Steiner talks about ego. You have to have a strong ego or sense of self in order to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the astrality overwhelms you, or you start
Mhm.
teaching out of your own astral body,
Mhm.
and it's just all emotional and craziness,
I
right?
follow everything you're saying. Go on. Yep.
Well, not, but I think
Well,
when you talk about the mass psychology of crowds, it
yeah.
works by the same principle.
Well, here then let me an angle I think of, working for the churches. Our friend Guido would say that the Catholic Church has not produced like an amazing intellectual in the last 200 years. We have like smart, really, really smart people. But I think too, this guy I've mentioned in the podcast, Gerald Hurd, um, he's a fascinating guy, but I always say regarding AI, a similar kind of tech, which is in the Catholic Church, we should producing people who have enough of the ego. 2,000 years after the incarnation, we should be producing more people who can stand above propaganda. Does that make sense? Who aren't totally influenced. But so our mission as a church should be really taking, developing that seed of personhood in each individual. And
Huh.
that same personhood, that the word, when you're saying that teacher has to go into a room and kind of command, a lot of us listening can say, wow, that almost sounds astral itself. But I would say, why aren't we producing people of stature? Isn't that a good word? People could come into a classroom and they have the stature to handle these situations, that to see the young people as acting out of their emotional life, their
Right.
feeling life, that astrality. And you can use the work you've done, to the descent of the ego, the I, when
Right.
you find out who you are. A lot of that has to do with, the season we're in, Christmas. But like,
Right.
what was Michael Martin's vocation? What was that thing for him that was also where work was also play? What did Michael Martin, when I think of the Immaculate Conception, what did Michael Martin want to be when he was a kid? What did God want those particular traits for Michael to have? Insofar as Michael Martin has developed those traits, he has stature. He has some stature. So he can go into these places and become an educator, helping other people to move into that a little bit. Do you jive with any of that?
Uh, yes, but there's no way I wanted to do what I'm doing now when I was a kid. I had no idea.
Yeah, yeah.
But I definitely see that all I did.
What would your parents say you were? How would your parents describe you as an infant? Like, what were the things you were
As an
playing with?
infant, I
What?
don't know. When I was a little boy, though, I wanted to be a
Mhm.
priest or an artist or a scientist. So I
An
became a
artist,
Wall.
scientist. Sure. That's
I
what
became a
you're
Waldorf
doing
teacher.
now. That's what
I
you're
mean,
doing
inside
now.
Waldorf.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I had no idea. I mean, you would if you would have told me even until I was in my early 20s that I would end up being a teacher and a professor, I would have told you were on crack.
I think it ties total to your infancy, though. Those same things. That's my
Ah,
point.
hard
Yeah.
to say, but I do think talking about Catholic intellectuals over the last 200. I think we've had a few, but I think this is an interesting thing.
Yeah, I'm
They
sure
kind
you're going to be right here.
of
Go ahead. Yeah.
they kind of get shot, but I think if I just off the top of my head, De Lubac and Balthazar come
They're
right to
great.
mind.
Yeah.
I mean, especially Balthazar, what a mind that guy had.
In so many fields.
Almost Goethe-like. He's not quite there, but he's made in that mold, right? And he
Um,
abandoned the
Not as
Jesuits
free
to
as
become
you
a
think.
mystic.
I was having a conversation with a friend this week who's big into Balthazar and very big, and would say, here's an analogy. Oh, we're going to have, yeah, this analogy. Well, I'm going to put it off for another podcast, but I can see it here. Talking about theologians who are so observed with the fences. And well, I'll mention Father John Gribwich. We'll have him on. But I want to have him to talk about this, that MBA studies, learn this in MBA school, a wild image that if you have kids with a field without fences and you have a jungle gym in the middle, they they congregate around the jungle gym. But if you took out a perimeter, even a quarter of a mile, and you put a pretty strong fence there, pretty strong fence, not a dilapidated one, pretty strong fence, but I'm not talking about prison walls. The kids
Right.
are playing everywhere. They're so free and they're so
Right.
creative. They're creating their own games. And that von Balthasar might be somebody who, what I find in the church, we're so worried about policing the fences, right? That we just got to believe if we have good fences, which I think we do, then we don't you think that's an insight with legs? And I'm going to give credit to Father John Gribwich for this one, and we'll have him
Um,
on soon.
well, I think with Balthazar, and I think I even mentioned what you just were alluding to in the
Okay.
Sovereign Reality. I think after he saw what happened to Teilhard and de Lubac, he had to
Sure.
be very careful with his language.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think he is careful with his language, but again, with him, you got to read between the lines. But level of intellect, yes, he wasn't.
Totally. I think
Yep.
David Cayley only has him free from an Elichian sense. David Cayley, I can't speak for him, would have von Balthasar. It might be a book like To the Barricades, to the Ramparts. I have it, and I'm sorry, I could look it up. Early von Balthasar was totally free. It was gospel, I guess. And I've got
Well,
to
and
read
then
it again. A
and
small
then the
little
shit hit the
volume,
fan.
black paperback. Yeah,
And
shit hit the
then
fan.
when Surnaturel came out with de Lubac, and then there was all that pushback, and then there was pushback about Teilhard.
Yeah.
Um, that's the problem with the control mechanism, like the ecclesia, right? Um, but at least I think we had a couple. and I think the early 20th century, it wasn't just Catholic theologians who were brilliant. You had, I mean, Freud, as much as I disagree with him, what a brilliant man.
I got
Jung,
something to say about that. Go ahead. Yep.
there were all these brilliant
Mhm.
thinkers in the first half of the 20th century and into the latter part of the 20th century. That was kind of a golden, and also you see it in literature, right? This is the age of Eliot and uh,
Ezra
Faulkner
Pound in her own way,
and Ezra
his
Pound
own way. Huh?
and James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. I mean, the high modernists. I mean, it was really kind of a D.H. Lawrence you could throw in there, kind of a high water Yeats.
Mhm.
This high water mark of modern literary production, and I don't think it's been equaled since. Not
Mhm.
even close. I remember seeing an interview with with Harold Bloom talking about the same problem. He said, I'll tell you that, Seamus Heaney is a very fine poet, but he's no William Butler Yeats,
Right, right, right.
right? And it's
What do you
kind of
say about like when you look at say um you were saying a Darwin, a Marx, Freud, again, brilliant insights. I'm preparing for this class in Catholic social thought, and there was a brilliant Anna Rowland is her name, an English professor, Catholic theologian. I was just kind of looking to her work, and she's saying, a fun question is, um, not discounting the church fathers, or again, a hidden stream that comes through the Middle Ages, Nicholas of Cusa and others.
uh,
Why did we say Catholic social thought? The greatest kept secret in the Catholic Church. Why did it blossom with Leo the 13th, kind of rerum novarum? And she
yeah.
would say that what happened with the French Revolution, that's one whole tale. But the other one would be like when you have like Freud and Darwin, to a certain extent, Marx, you have these world-altering philosophical systems, but they all tend to work, absent God. And so, yeah, I mean, these guys were towering geniuses. I think what we're talking about is it the way the church danced with these things? Where do you specifically lay the fault?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think
Okay.
just that those generations of intellectuals were real intellectuals.
They were.
I mean, they were really well educated. And this is why it's I got all kinds of problems with Freud, but you got to give the guy some credit for being daring enough to
I
to
like them.
he had daring to him,
Yeah.
intellectual daring, and so did
Hmm.
Jung after him. So did Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah.
So did all those literary figures I mentioned. They had moxie.
Uh-huh.
They,
Yeah.
but we don't have that now. I don't see anybody. I mean, the thing is, and I would say in a way, even though they were not necessarily out of the church, though, but von Balthasar certainly was. Um, there was they did not suffer from the fear of making something big and important. Whereas over the last 40 years at least,
Get somewhat concrete here.
has been, deconstruction has been about tearing down, but
Yeah.
destroying, but it doesn't have
Mhm.
anything to put in its place.
Right.
And so, um, in general, and I think this is part of what you see with the cultural kind of decline we're living through right now, and where people are going, wow, we went wrong someplace. So maybe it's the Orthodox Church. Maybe we have to go to the Orthodox or the Trinity Catholic route or something because we lost something along the way.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, and it's not just, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily even a conscious feeling that people have, but there's certainly a sense that, I mean, I've described the period we're living in as the new dark ages.
Right.
We're
I'm
living in
with.
kind
I'm
of
with.
dark ages
Uh-huh.
is as much information as we have at our fingertips. We're living in an extraordinarily dark time. And there's not, but on the other hand, that was that was the case right before the Renaissance, right?
Hmm.
So
Or
or
before the Middle
before the
Ages.
Renaissance of the
Yeah.
12th century, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, I don't think it lasts forever, but I think, it's almost like we're in an age of extreme superstition of a scientific materialist, nihilistic superstition.
I agree. I
I mean,
agree.
yeah.
Say more.
Well, I think it's just um you know, what rough beast is ours? It's our come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born.
Right, right, right.
Talk about a Christmas message. Merry Christmas.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you know, there's just there's been a foreboding ever since, well, it's been very obvious to me since COVID, but it was before that, right? It's probably all my entire life, this foreboding of something ominous on the way, something not good. Um, but if you look back, I mean, gosh, and I'm it's kind of interesting. We saw the rebuilding of Notre Dame a few weeks ago, right? It was
What's
unveiled.
what's the hot take on that? I just don't know enough about it. Like, wasn't there like after the fire, A, was there some conspiracy about the fire? Was there not? The second one was, I
Oh, there
think I saw
was.
some plans for like a rooftop garden on a new one. It was all going to be
I didn't.
glass.
Yeah, I don't think they did any of that stuff. But I
Okay, so
think it's
yeah,
not.
I didn't follow any of it. Yeah.
But we'll take Notre Dame out of it. But the thing is, if you
Mhm.
look at these tremendous monuments of art and culture over the West, over the past certainly 1,000 years, like the building of the cathedrals, which are extraordinary. I mean, they're just ex engineering marvels,
I agree.
especially with the guys who did them with no power tools, right? Or the music of Bach,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Or Michelangelo. You can see these kind of extraordinary, what they call in Greek, mega ergon, these great achievements.
Right.
And there's a great book by William Manchester, which I really loved. It's been years since I read it, but I used to use it when I taught at a Waldorf school. It's called A World Lit Only by Fire. So it's talking about all these extraordinary achievements, through the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. And you have to remember, they didn't have electricity, right?
Mhm.
They didn't even have decent navigation tools. And believe it or not, they didn't have GPS. But they did these extraordinary things, right? They made extraordinary works of art. And the thing is, we can't equal them, I don't
And
think.
why do you say it isn't? I begin, I'm not saying it this is exhaustive, but of course I would go down a strongly kind of Sophia versus Ahriman, the Ahrimanization of the world, the left braining of the world, the algorithmization. That's why I look at, a little more Christ and Antichrist,
Yeah.
and that I see, it's not about pointing out the evil so much as um if it's kind of apocalyptic, like looking for the bright opportunities that we have now, you know.
Mhm. Well, you know what Rudolf Steiner would say?
Tell me.
And actually, if you in his lectures on agriculture in the introduction written by Aaron Fried Pfeiffer, I think Dr. Pfeiffer said to Dr. Steiner one day, said, "Why is it you got all this cool stuff, all these great teachings, and these people can't do it?
Uh-huh.
They just don't have the guts, and they bicker, they do all this stuff." And Steiner said something, I think it's very really telling. And this is 100 years ago. He said, "It's a problem of nutrition." He said, "The nutritional value available in foodstuffs today, it is not enough to allow the spirit of man to incarnate fully.
Right.
So it's all, in a
Interesting.
way, we're all mentally retarded."
I think I could buy a lot of that.
And and like a big, big concern with us, if we have like I don't know how much, we got a lot of meat in the freezer right now, but in a couple weeks I take the lambs in.
Yeah.
Um, then we'll have, 3 freezers full of meat, probably chicken, duck, venison, lamb. We still got beef left. I don't know what the hell else is in there. Pork. There's some pork. Um, Yet, one of our biggest concerns, if we have to go to the grocery store, it takes us a lot longer than other people because we're reading ingredients, trying to
Uh-huh.
not get stuff with GMOs. And you heard, I cannot remember what it's called. There's this new thing they're introducing it in Britain already. They're trying to get it, or they maybe have already passed it as legal in the United States. It's another Bill Gates thing, right?
Which
Where it's
is
something they add to dairy, which is bad news. I can't remember what it's called, but everything I've read about it, it's like, oh man, that ain't good. Um, and you have these sociopaths trying to I mean, have been effing with the food supply
Uh-huh.
for decades. Well, it goes back to Steiner was saying it 100 years ago. He said it already, and that was only about when 1920, so about 30 or maybe 40 years from the introduction of chemical fertilizers in farming,
Mhm.
right? And there was also at the same time he gave lectures around then to about beekeeping. And in his beekeeping lectures, it's blows your mind that he's getting into this debate with one of the people, and there's a question and answer thing. Mr. Mueller, his name is. And Mr. Mueller says, "Yes, but you know what? We're getting a lot more honey with these new methods, and and it's going to be really great, and everything is it's productive. We're making money finally." And Steiner says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. But just guess what? I'm just going to tell you right now that if you keep going this way, it's going to destroy bees, and it's
Yeah,
going to destroy their fertility and their health." So he tells him, "So do me a favor, check back with me in 60 years. We'll see
right,
who was
right.
right." And he was right.
Yeah,
I mean, he called it almost to the day, right?
I agree. One of the when I think this way, earlier in the conversation, I was talking about scale, and that this Christ Antichrist thing during our time, I think could break through at any moment. That all of a sudden we're going to find that we have allies that we didn't know were allies because we kind of released the blinders from our eyes. But insofar as I can't think of the rejuvenation or the regeneration of the Catholic Church without thinking of a different total view about education and a different total view about health, the medical system and the educational establishment. I think the real villain in, I think it's nutrition, but the real villain is the idea of scarcity, right? That's
Right.
for the people like Guido or my son Aiden. Like the central issue is, um, we can use the word usury, but it's what usury does to taint literally everything. That it makes everything look scarce. That it makes museums show garbage instead of beautiful things. It makes, it quantifies, again, kind of left braining. What say you to that? It's not a disagreement, but
Well, well, Steiner also talked about this
yeah.
about with in terms of architecture that the space and William Morris at the same time was saying the same thing. The things we use in the places we inhabit, just the buildings and you know they have an effect on, like Steiner would say, man's spirit.
No
They
problem.
have an effect, and we pretend they don't. And I used to always mention this when I was teaching college because college classrooms are the most deadening environments known to man.
In
It's
many
just
respects.
all the fluorescent lights and the cinder block and the plastic desks and all, it just looks, it's so inhuman.
Uh-huh.
And used to make jokes when I was teaching at Adrian College, where my sister went to school in 1981. I said, "This is probably the same furniture and probably the same posters on the wall that were here when my sister was here." And they never make it feel
No.
like a welcoming environment.
No, there's videos online about YouTube that just go through school after school after school. One's called Scary School Nightmare. They just all look
Yeah,
like institutions and yep.
it is ugly.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of spoiled because, having trained and served as a Waldorf teacher for 16 years and taught, and if you go into a Waldorf school, man, that is the coziest feeling place you can ever go.
Uh-huh.
Into a Waldorf classroom, it feels like home. It feels warm and inviting, right?
Yeah.
Even Steiner had, a science of color for what color should be in the classrooms for various grades. You don't have to get all that story, but just the fact that, I went from being a Waldorf teacher and I had in my classroom, you had a music stand at the front of the room where I put my notes and but the front of the classroom I had a Persian rug that was there. The some schools the kids even make their own desks, right? There's such care about how the environment looks. One of the things Steiner talked about was if you look at a door, I think we talked about this with
Yeah.
Stefan.
With that, Stefan, that was a great
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah.
that if you look at a door, just be looking at it, you wouldn't know what side it's supposed to open if
Hmm.
the knob wasn't there. But
Yeah.
think about that. I mean, how do we make these spaces human centered? And William Morris is doing the same thing about that, right? How to make and William Morris was concerned that it should be not a luxury to have to live an environment that is is human, is
Yeah.
tailored around human and not around efficiency. In fact, I can't I can't do it right now, but some of the hinges in my house was built in the 1860s. Probably a lot of the stuff came in much later. But some of the hinges on my house, on the inside, right? So here's a hinge.
Hmm.
Right? And they have this extraordinarily like flowered like scroll work on
Yeah.
something nobody ever really looks at.
Hmm.
But even though you don't look at it, you kind of get the subliminal effect of it. And with the same thing with the materials that are in a building, with whether it's, big difference between wood and plastic, right?
Right.
They
When you
actually have a different effect on the soul.
totally, when you think of somebody like Michael Baywins, is that how his name is pronounced? He was on the
Yeah.
podcast. Really great guy. I think of him and I admire this.
Oh, Michelle
Michel,
Bauman.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. He's got a like a bird's eye view, and he sees goodness and all these movements in so many places. He's just promoting and always, and you can follow him on Twitter. He's been on the podcast, and he's so genteel and he's so knowledgeable. Um, and yet I wonder how he does it. I wonder how he does it. Like I'm somebody who has to be kind of connected to something real with a face. Um, and it gets into the scale of like where we begin these things. Part of me wonders that we're getting um again, with the issue being, it's almost like we began by programming, right? That everybody crowds, that educationally gets to the individual, not the person. And for
Mhm.
me, I can't talk about this in the Christmas season without thinking, where we're supposed to be at our time. The notion of stature, people growing into their personhood so they can educate people out of the crowds, like lead them one by one out of the crowds. Um, when I look at scale and I see somebody like Michelle, and it leaves me like, I don't know how he finds gas in the tank to continue. But it's very noble. I don't know, like I don't even know what I'm saying when I say that. But um, I think right now the kingdom is probably available to anybody crazy enough to start their own initiative, right? Um, everything. I think the Titans are fighting with themselves so much, and part of it is that all of a sudden, we can walk out of our foxholes sometimes and just start at least trying to do things until people tell us we have to stop. Yeah.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, what you're describing is there's already organically, I wouldn't say but a network or a federation of parallel polises.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was, there certainly an unintended consequence of all the weird restrictions in the World Economic Forum and all their
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
You own nothing and be happy. It was kind of an unintended consequence, at least from their part,
Yeah.
that more people are. And it was interesting. I mean, I can't remember what, just going through Twitter or X this week, how many people in on there who didn't, like Naomi Wolf was one of them, who used to think that the idea of chemtrails was this crazy conspiracy talk.
Uh-huh.
And so many of them now are like, actually, I think that's what it is. They're poisoning the sky, you
Yeah.
know? And because well, and I think, and this is, kind of a blessing in disguise, is the archons overplayed their hand. They way overplayed their hand.
But we got to get into the weeds on that because part of me thinks like there's no stopping this juggernaut. I think the reason I venture myself down this road is that um, I think the thing itself is coming. They like when Guido talks about Italy, that like the taxation and the identification of everybody. The notion that like you have to use a code to check your email, to check this, to get confirmed, to possibly buy a train ticket. He said like in Italy, that level of bureaucracy is like 5 times where it is here, and that nobody for their official job, nobody can actually pay their bills for anything. So there's a massive black market. But at the same time, trades are kind of declining. But so the CBDCs and things like that are definitely coming. In one sense, I think it's a juggernaut, and everything is taxed and followed and regulated. That I wonder if that the good news is the entrance point into some of the freedom is where we should be spending our time now. So they kind of overplayed their hand, but not really. They're regrouping. It's still coming to take, to get every penny, everything,
They're gonna try, yeah.
with an
I
ID
mean,
cord. Sure, sure.
they're gonna try for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing is they overplayed their hand to the point where even the people they call the normies are now going, wait a minute, that doesn't
Uh-huh.
make, I'm not down with this.
Yeah.
So there's, but it also, at least in this country, and it's interesting to talk to Guido, see what's going on in Italy, um, that alternative media has totally destroyed the mainstream media, or the legacy media, as they call it, right? Totally
Yeah. Right.
destroyed.
Right. Right. No, you mentioned
I
that.
mean, it's ruined. It's in pieces, and the only people who watch legacy media anymore are boomers. I saw an interesting statistic the other day that in the last election, um, millennials and young people moved like 16 points toward Trump,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, you had mentioned that last week. Yeah.
boomers moved 3% toward Kamala Harris.
Uh-huh.
And the analysis, and I think it's compelling, was that because yeah, those guys, the boomers are the ones still watching CNN and the other kinds of legacy media outlets, and everybody else is getting their news from podcast and this and that, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's something to be said for that. And it's great for me to watch that, because as we know, the legacy media was all in, they have been in the tank for the World Economic Forum and for the Democrat Party and all the things that we were like, well, that's great, or big pharma. They've been in the tank for those guys all the way along. And that's, and the reason, one of the reasons, as we know, is because in this country, it's not against the law, like it is in almost every other country except for New Zealand, to advertise pharmaceutical products on television. So the pharmaceutical industry has been bankrolling the legacy media. And I don't know if I think maybe you mentioned it last time, that was it MSNBC, that their viewership at a certain peak time was 38,000?
Yeah.
How do you stay alive on that?
But that begs the question of, say, France and all those countries that didn't have
Well,
all of
they have
their,
censorship.
uh,
They have more censorship than we do.
yeah,
That's why the EU is trying to shut down Twitter, for instance.
uh-huh.
They're talking about, and they use the same thing, because we need to make people safe from disinformation, right? And you see what's going on in England. They just, and the thing is, and they have this ecosystem that goes from the governments to the corporations to the media outlets, and it was here too. But it's been somebody, Elon Musk, is, I have questions about him, but he threw, I'm with him on free speech. He threw a monkey wrench into that, into their plan, and that
Yeah.
now they're going after him.
I always think, like, I'm always asking these preemptive questions. Would the people who, I think of Elon Musk like a lot. I'm not so sure he represents like my interests or the interests of like regular people, but would, one thing you and I would say about the free speech piece is that we knew people who legitimately didn't think there was any censorship going on. And that was really, really
And
sad. That's what
still don't.
I know. But what is somebody like Elon Musk doing? Is he again trying to rise? Is anybody in that administration, maybe Nicole Shanahan or somebody, trying to rise to the stature where the issue again is scale and power. It's, the idea of scarcity. I don't see that much changing where our people, the new, the new group forming, are they necessarily, that's where like when Bill Kaufman had, dinner with RFK Jr. and wrote about it. Is there something kind of fundamentally corrupted about that level that they would have, like, would Elon Musk have the stature to like have a cuticle filed in a different way on behalf of free speech? Like where did that like moral integrity come from? When
Well,
it just
I mean,
doesn't
I
seem
think,
to work that way.
but I think the danger here
Yeah.
and that's from Catholic social teaching. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Is
No, I'm open to all
we
the
tend to want
criticisms.
to demonize all billionaires as evil and all working class and poor people as noble and good. But we know that's not true. I mean, there are a lot of
I
evil
totally
people,
agree with that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
working class people,
Uh-huh.
you know. They might not have power that does, well, put it this way, they might not have the kind of power that Elon Musk has or Bill Gates has, but they have other kinds of power.
I know, but isn't the obvious
That's
rejoinder that like, yeah, that
like
Elon Musk, what
president.
he considers good, I would call evil. That's the scary thing. Like kind of wiring my brain into some
Yeah,
like
I like
cloud.
that. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not into
I know,
that,
but it's
right?
almost more scary that he calls it good. It almost makes that type more deceitful. Or we
But
should
I'd rather
be
have discussion
articulating
out
this.
in the open than have somebody just force it down, right?
I
And,
don't, yeah.
and to limit your ability to say so. Now, and he's been kind of that's how it gets represented. But I've seen interviews with him where he
See, I
says,
haven't. I don't know that
"Yeah,
much.
AI is a scary thing, and you're gonna have to watch it."
Uh-huh.
He said it's coming, but it scares him. He said, right? And
What
this
are
is
we
a
supposed to
fear here.
do with that? What are we supposed to do with that?
Um,
That'd be
well,
like some president saying, like George Bush saying, "I'm for a gentler, more humble foreign policy," and bombing like
yeah,
Iraq back into the
exactly.
Stone
Yeah.
Age. Yeah.
Well, what we do about what the AI thing, Butlerian jihad. That's what we do.
Say more.
Well, you know that it's one of the Dune books, the Butlerian jihad,
No,
where
see, I've got to get into that trilogy. I know it. That would be like I don't even know the Tolkien
well,
world that
it's
much.
one
You
of
know.
the prequels because in the
Okay.
Dune books, right? So they're using swords and stuff to fight. They have some kind of guns, but mostly it's swords and whatever. Um, but they don't have computers. But that was intentional
I like
on
this. I like this. I've been drawn to Dune.
No,
Yeah.
Herbert, whatever his last name is, first name
Yeah.
is. His
Right.
intention was that he wanted to show that this was a society that had to make a law that you could never have a thinking machine because there was like a thinking machine and the thinking machines were taking over, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
Isaac Asimov, it's iRobot on steroids.
Uh-huh.
And so that there's the Butlerian Jihad is a war from of the humans against the machines.
Yeah.
And we're
And
heading
it's
in that direction really
and his
quickly.
hero is Samuel Butler.
I don't know where that can't remember where that came from.
Samuel Butler was a big kind of like very articulate. People need to roar about him more about him. He wasn't like a foe of Darwin, but he was somebody who was just again, he had I'm going to use the word again, he had stature. He saw the game as if like uh Thomas Jude Germanario, his brother Mark Germanario could
Okay.
say, I didn't see it so clearly, but like the survival of the fittest is a tautology, right? It's like we need
Yeah.
to rise above. A computer says you can't read this sentence is a lie because if it reads it, so you just rise above it. We know that Jabberwocky is Jabberwocky and we have fun with it. But Samuel Butler, to his own ability, I think, G.K. Chesterton just could rise above the Darwinian machine. So it didn't make Darwin, um, he wasn't half as evil as people made him out to be, or Jordan. Yeah, Jordan Peterson need not come into this, but somebody like Samuel Butler just rose above. I wonder if that's why Frank Herbert took him
I
for
don't
his.
know. I don't know why
Yeah,
it'd be interesting. So I'm sure one of our listeners knows more about it than I do
yeah, yeah.
because
What
people
other
get this.
worlds? It's almost a Christmas theme. What other worlds do you? I see. I'm not that well read in the world of fantasy or anything. I kind of know a decent amount about Stephen R. Donaldson. I'm a big fan of this Peter Beagle who wrote The Last Unicorn. We've
Right.
talked about that book, and I've read most everything he's written. That's a whole genius area for me. What if when you say like Dune and or the Star Wars world never meant anything to me. Um,
Yeah.
what worlds like that have been ones that you've enjoyed inhabiting?
Well, Philip K. Dick.
Okay.
Philip K. Dick
Does
was
every novel relate to every other novel in some way? Some of the characters overlap, or is it
well,
just a neat corpus?
well, he's got certain themes. I mean, one of his themes is identity, right?
Okay.
How do you know you're not brainwashed, or how do you know you're real? How do you know you're
Hmm.
human? Right? It's a
Yeah.
big theme in the books. Um, and also appearance and reality is another thing. So in Blade Runner, this comes up in which was made from one of his books. But how do you know what you see is real?
Hmm.
How do you know the the appearances that are that are being shown you
Mhm.
are authentic and real,
Mhm.
right? Like, and it's kind of an interesting thing where we saw,
Yeah, weave this into like book recommendations for Christmas. Have a little fun with it. I'll have a little fun with it. And we can,
you
yeah.
know, I, you know, um, Valise, I think Philip K. Dick's book
Okay.
Valise is
Okay.
like it's in a very Gnostic too, and
Hmm.
he had kind of this crazy religious experience, this mystical experience that is kind of related and unpacked in his book that just came out a few years ago called The Exegesis, where it's
Okay.
basically his notes, and it's when he was working on the book Valise, but it's very Gnostic, very Sophianic, very wild. It's a wild ride, and
Huh.
I think he was a prophet. And in fact, um, so many of the things in his books and then the movies made from his books have come true. I mean, if you did you ever see the movie Minority Report?
No, I haven't, but I'm aware of it. Tom Cruise
Minority
and
Report, there's an interesting thing that happens, and I think it came out in 2003, 2005, where Tom Cruise plays this police officer who all of a sudden is the hunt. He was the hunter, now he's the hunted.
Mhm.
So, and the way that they in that film and in the book that they identify somebody is by their cornea. So you have to get an eye test kind of thing or an eye.
It's here. Yeah.
It's
As we
surveillance,
found with
right?
that guy who shot the guy CEO in the face, like
And so
face detection's wild. Yeah.
For Tom Cruise's character to not be able to be identified because they'll grab him, he
Hmm.
gets cornea transplants. He gets eye transplants, and you know what happened earlier in the film? He goes into the shopping mall,
Uh-huh.
and I can't remember the name of the character he plays, but the advertisement greets him. Hey, welcome back, Tom Cruise. Nice to have you back. Can I show
Huh.
you some of our selections over here? And then after he gets the eye transplant, he walks in and the same image, the same advertising image speaks to him and she says, "Hello, Mr. Yamamoto."
Wow. Wow. Huh.
Because he's got Mr. Yamamoto's eyes now.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we have with targeted advertising and the stuff now, right?
Right. Right.
Some people will wonder if that was predictive programming. But Philip K. Dick wrote these books in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
So he saw where it was going, right? And and also in Minority Report, both the short story and the film, a big part of it is what they call the pre-crime unit. So you get arrested before you commit the crime.
Uh-huh. I see it.
They know you're gonna commit a crime, so they come in and arrest you before you commit the crime.
Hmm.
I mean, we're really kind of at that. And in fact, you could say England is at that point right now where they arrest people before they've committed a crime.
What would be like at Christmas? What would be a word? Um, what's a word that can awaken people? You know, I was thinking even I'd written myself a note, not to be like over Christmassy, but like the theme of I remember Father Ed, who died this year, would say regarding Christmas, it's all there in the second verse of Oh Holy Night. You know, the slave is our brother. Um, for John Cowper Powys, who I would recommend for people, you know, he could look at the gospel and say the liberating messages are forgiveness, the equality of all souls. You know, for Boris Pasternak, um, you know, the ability to put yourself into another person's place. But he said, you know, that Christ came so that man might not evermore die in a ditch like a dog, you know, unknown, without a name. Um, what does that make you think of?
Well, two things. I think the great Anglican hymn and from a poem by Christine Rossetti, "In the Bleak Midwinter."
That's so trendy right now, and it might be. Have you noticed that it's trendy? My wife was just saying it's
It's more
everywhere.
popular now than it has been in the past, for sure.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
last few years, I think.
Uh-huh. Say
Um,
why you find it moving.
because I think we've been living through bleak times,
Yeah.
you know, and people await and actually another thing that just I don't know if you saw this too, but I saw like a few people on their Substacks did a thing yesterday and today about Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, right?
Yeah, Mithraism kind
It
of.
was the Mithraic festival, which coincides with Christmas, and it means basically the same thing, right? The
Hmm.
unconquered sun, and Jesus is
Yeah,
the unconquered sun, right?
yeah,
Um, and even though, as you point out, Christ came that people wouldn't die anonymously in ditches, but people die anonymously in ditches all the time.
right.
Um, Nevertheless, I mean, that's kind of the hope you hold to,
Mhm.
right? Is the dark is the darkness cannot overcome it,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
this is we kind of we reenact that mystery in St. John's Gospel every year at this time, right?
Yeah. I think this occurred to me, and give me just honest feedback because I'm not saying it's a great idea, but you can basically follow. I think one of these seminal authors of our time is this Ian McGilchrist, and I'm as guilty as not even gotten through a third of the mind, the master and his emissary. But this left brain, right brain stuff, which I bring up all the time. Today it occurred to me that if we're going through something, quite apocalyptic, in one level for me, it's Russian dolls. There's enlightenment after enlightenment.
Right.
But I can have us going into, I think we're going through a pretty big epical transformation. Um, I think we're incorporating the darkness and light. We have, there's the themes of Latin Christianity that are kind of, top down, juridical. And I think it's almost a return with a difference is the big theme now for Powys. This theme of sailor's embarkation meets sailor's return, that final movement to the symphony, the Age of Aquarius. I think
Mhm.
that these themes, um, you know, are hopeful ones at our time. I don't think they're pie in the sky. I think that the what was the other big Powys theme? It's of note based on what you were just saying, and I'm sorry I lost my track there. Is that his masterwork Boreas is based on 3 days around a Mithraic festival. Um, Up in northern England. But one of the things when I mentioned the brain hemisphere is that the divine feminine is making a return in our time. So I would say that she had to be repressed at one level because of what we're almost seeing play out in our time, where the alma mater, that can be a Janus face figure, Mother Church, who keeps you in an infantile formation, like Rapunzel's kept in a tower, versus Mother Church that, sends out schools. The mothering, like alma mater, the
Right.
mothering that is supposed to send you out, and hospitals that are supposed to send you out with health to transform the world, just kind of keep you close, you're tethered to their thing. Is
Right.
that one of the aspects of that with the divine feminine and Catholicity? And I'm going to put it under the patronage of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and those things that need to take place with Catholicism in our country, in our time, is that the the divine the divine paternity has always been like in the brain formation, somewhat abstracted, right? The left brain is the abstracted algorithmic take. It's all in the world of ideas. But another way it all comes together for me is the divine feminine is, that's the primal divinity. The divine paternity, which its tyranny might be ending at our time, is just as we mentioned von Balthasar, who was so free, but had to buy into that much more narrow take. But does it make sense that like the divine feminine is the right brain, and we have to put it almost primary again, Mary, the mother of God, the true ramifications of the
Right.
Theotokos, right? Um, that I think we're going through something very, very epical like that. It's in slow motion, but it's a much bigger return to earth, as your point, nutrition and things like that.
Well, I think, yeah, I think there there's that kind of stuff, and if the nutrition thing is not even, it's just common sense, right?
Common sense,
It's
common sense.
science. It's basic science in a way.
But
Um,
they're gonna find out the whole secret to nutrition is, implied in what you say. It's called eat good food.
well, yeah, and the
Oh,
thing
the
is,
whole point to health
they'll
is eat good food.
the, well, is the also the the
Soil.
kind of noise about it right now. It's going after Bobby Kennedy and stuff like that. Is that they're at, well, how are you going to feed everybody, right? And and it's crazy because what happens is people who are actually advocating for real food are dismissed as nuts.
Yeah, I'm not
And-
there.
right? And the other thing is, oh, with the feminine, and I think this is important. Um, and Rudolf Steiner was onto this, right? Because he said we had to go through the Kali Yuga. We had to go through scientific materialism. It's the bottom, right? It's the
Mhm.
most
Yeah.
materialistic you can get before
Mhm.
you can go rise again. To go, you can't go around it. You got to go through it.
Yeah.
But and I think part of this, or part at least just part of what I see for the future, and you already see stirrings of it, is that what like I in the mid the subtitle of the submerged reality is sociology going to turn to a poetic metaphysics,
I agree.
right?
That's a huge
Is that
theme, poetic metaphysics. Yep.
is this poetic metaphysics or this the rise of intuition or you know and I wouldn't call them alternative. In fact, I can't remember who I was talking to.
Well, our
Um
friend Stephen Clark, it's like the pictures part of this. It was the rise of abstract art in its best way, the rise of jazz music in its best form, the rise of 12-step spirituality. A lot of these things are connected in our time. Do you equate those in any way or no?
no, not
Okay,
necessarily, but I do.
I see them all as part of a piece.
Well, it depends. It depends,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I do th the rise of intuition, right?
Hmm.
Inspiration, we're love time, inspiration and intuition. That and that which is a kind of which is spiritual insight, which is real spiritual insight.
Right.
That is something we have been, well, actually, what I'm thinking, I gotta do some research, but one of the things I think about writing about is Um, actually, it was much more recent than I thought. It was in the early part of the 20th century where ether was dismissed as an element,
Right, right.
right? And I didn't realize it was that recent until I was teaching. I had this online sociology course, and one of the readings we did one week was
And what's the date you gave it again?
early 20th century.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Was that we read what's it called? The Divine Feminine by Teilhard,
Okay.
which is a kind of a prose poem. And in there, he's talking about the ether as like it was something that people still believed in. I forgot. Oh yeah, that was they still believe that. Then I forgot.
Hmm.
Which has been kind of blown out of the memory, right?
Yeah.
But in a way, we've talked about cloud busting before. So a cloud buster, and also you could say the radionics or the biodynamic preparations, they work with the ether.
Right, right.
And I think that's something that that kind of those into it, but you can't quantify it. You can't nail it down, right? Just like life. You
I buy it
can't
all. Yep.
nail down what life is.
Yep.
Scientists can tell you how a thing lives, but they can't tell you what life is.
Hmm.
They cannot tell you. And you ask
I'm
them
with
where,
you.
where
Yep.
you ask them where life started from, they give you some, well, it's probably electricity hit some mud. Oh, come on. That's
Uh-huh.
talk about a creation myth,
They can't really
right?
tell you what electricity is, right? And
Can't
stuff.
tell them
And
what they
yeah,
can't tell you what life is. And
yeah,
and we know, your Bible, you're right. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, the Zoe, right?
yeah. Right, right.
That does not exist in the scientific understanding of our time. It's
Yeah,
only theos. Nobody can tell you what life is,
yeah.
which is, come on, that should be like, shouldn't that be a bigger,
It's the
bigger
same way that
issue?
Eros. Do you think that again, Eros is being eclipsed in our time? That's the point of Eric Fromm and this The Agony of Eros, the book by the wonderful Korean philosopher we'd been discussing. That, it's the idea of the other is under the mass, that's why the crowd is the thing, the tyranny of the same with propaganda. But could you make a tie between life and Eros? They're both severely in danger of getting eclipsed in our time, along with the other, just the other.
Well, yeah, Eros. I mean, love. Saint Augustine, love
Sure.
calls it things of this world, and you saw, probably, I know you saw that this young British woman had sex with 100 men in 24 hours. I don't know if
The
you saw that.
OnlyFans story. Yeah, I did. I did.
But the thing is, the saturation of pornography in our culture is such that, in a way, it's it's the simulacra of Eros. It's not real
Right.
Eros.
No,
And I think
100%.
you get all that going on, but also, and I know this from my own kids, you know, um, there are no social settings for them to meet people of the opposite sex.
That's where that Anthony
Mm.
Eslin begins, just getting young men. Do you know Anthony Eslin?
Yeah.
We would disagree on a lot of things, but I admire his courage. But he would say you rebuild culture if we were talking to you, or not to distribute it, as we say, but he would just get boys and girls together in kind of good cultural settings and start the whole thing over. And Father Ed
Dance,
came to the
right?
same approach himself. Yeah.
I mean, dances or or
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
kind, whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah. They're
Where,
not getting together. They're not getting
but
together.
and the thing is, when you get into those situations, and we did it, so you're like, you're going to talk to her. I'm not going to talk to her. You talk to her, right? So your
Yeah.
friends are like, go talk to her, right? Um, and that was a normal thing people had to grow up with. They had to learn how to do.
Yeah.
And I'm certain it's still there, but I don't think it's even any
It's
like
not
close
much.
to what it
No,
was.
no, no. It's probably
And now
more
it's all
gone than people
online.
think. Yeah,
So
it's close to
the
gone.
erotic, the erotic gets subverted into its parody, which is pornography,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
And that's the apocalyptic element of our time. That we're
Yeah, and
I think if we
right,
think in those ways, it's better than like the Antichrist coming in some of the way the rad trads talk about him. We can get
right,
at this phenomenon with a little more detail. And so the answer is going to be a little more of a human element than praying to Saint Michael in a certain form to
right,
swashbuckle for us.
right. But the
Yeah,
other thing is, I mean, I think it's intimately connected to everything we talked about. So with Eros, right?
yeah.
So you have this pornography goes up, true Eros goes down,
Almost non-existent.
but accompanying that trajectory is also the decline in fertility rates
Yeah.
across the West,
Hmm.
which is it's at alarming rates. In fact, Elon Musk, whom we mentioned earlier, that's one of
Yeah.
his main issues.
Yeah, he's a
So baby fever,
pro-natalist.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And it's disturbing. And then
Uh-huh.
the questions of, what is causing this lack in fertility, this destruction, which is, but
I
you
think it's
also
a Zoe deficit.
Zoe deficit and Eros deficit. And
Yeah.
and you see it also with this kind of diabolical apparition of, well, first the trans thing, right, which destroys fertility for a lot of people,
Uh-huh.
for most
Yeah.
people, right? Just,
Hmm.
if a girl gets her breast removed and she changes her mind about transitioning, guess what?
There's some
You
damage
won't be
done.
breastfeeding. It has to be a bottle baby, right?
Yeah.
Um, then people can't have children, and then so many things are destroyed that way in ways of fertility, and
Hmm.
also the phenomenon, which it was trumpeted a bit right at the beginning of the pandemic before and I've seen a couple blips upon it, but not much, about
Hmm.
artificial wombs, right?
Right.
Which is pure Brave New World. That's what they have in Brave,
100%. Hmm.
right? So all this crazy shit, when you could just go back to me, Tarzan, you, Jane, right?
Hmm.
And Tarzan and Jane meet in nature.
Yeah. And again, the
Dates in
Catholic
a dates in
Church,
high school,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And we're not producing people of stature to kind of look at the trans phenomenon in a way that, Philip K. Dick or yourself is doing and to kind of see where it's coming from. Like when we
This is
identify with a computer, gender's not going to be strong. So what are we going to do? We everything goes into the category of the moral, the culture
yeah,
wars category
and
that we don't always get it. Yep.
yeah. That's why that's all evidence of a new dark ages.
Yeah, 100%.
We're not only distanced from nature, we're distanced from our own bodies.
Scariest thing.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If Elon Musk wants to do this chip thing, and who knows that, it just could be a pipe dream. That's further, or he also wants to put up colonies on Mars, right?
What is
Which
Tucker's role lately? I just haven't followed the whole phenomenon much. I'm not on a news fast. I'm just like, is Tucker kind of splitting the difference between like Trump and Elon, or how do you describe it? Yeah.
um, I think after the election, it looks like he just kind of went back to doing the show.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know. I haven't. I don't think he's done that many.
He was over in Russia trying to do something. He was shortly thereafter, right? Like in
Yeah,
Ukraine. Yeah.
and he
Um,
did. That wasn't interesting. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't see the whole thing, but the parts I saw with the Russian ambassador, I can't remember his name. Um,
Sergei Lavrov, that guy.
yes, that's. I was impressed by that guy.
He's a grown up. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a grown up.
Yeah. Right, right, right.
Yeah, he should have
Yeah.
done AOC the next day, just
Uh-huh.
for contrast's sake, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's who's got I remember Elias Krim does not listen to the show, but he had a serious
On
crush.
principle, he doesn't, or no?
I just don't think I haven't heard from him in a long time. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
But he when AOC came out, he was like, "Oh man, see, she's just wonderful and smart." And when I checked her, I'm like, "No, she's not."
Uh-huh.
And the same thing with another friend of mine who was telling me that have you heard of this young girl? She's like Joan of Arc. She's a pure flame. Like I'm like, who's this? And she was talking about what's her name? Greta Thunberg.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I saw her
You
very
gotta be
early.
kidding, right? This is
Yeah,
a joke,
right. Yeah, yeah.
right?
I think I have on print or on paper, calling first Iraq War, COVID, Greta Thunberg, and like Mayor Buttigieg very early. And we just need these. It's not complicated, folks. AOC, I still I like. I'm somebody who um, I liked it when she would try to push back, and yet on the important issues she caves. Right, we just found out. I thought even when I disagreed with her on a lot on those areas where I agreed, I thought she showed some courage. But even on those, I've lost respect over time because when push comes to shove, she's going to stay in office. That's her thing and rise.
Yeah, I hate them all. But it
Yeah,
reminds me,
that's
speaking
all
of
of them
Greta
though.
Thunberg, you probably saw this meme with Greta Thunberg and Justin Trudeau.
No, I like both of
This
them. They're so
and the
funny. I
caption
like
is
both.
the most annoying little bitch in the world, speaking to Greta Thunberg.
Justin's
I
in
don't
real trouble. I didn't know how
laugh.
much trouble he was going to be in until Stefan. We've mentioned him twice. What a great guest. I
Yeah,
didn't think he was like lionized, but even at that point, Stefan was just saying that oh my God, he's despised. Um, and again, why couldn't have Canada seen through him prior to the trucker thing? You know?
who knows? The thing is, I think Canada, like Great Britain, their news media is government owned.
Yeah.
Government
Mhm.
owned. It's a branch of the government, and I think like we saw in what
That's what
really
David
shocked
Cayley was
me.
saying when we were talking to him too. Yeah.
I totally gave up on NPR, which I used to listen to kind of regularly.
Uh-huh.
I didn't always agree with the stuff, but it's always well
Sure.
produced. But I totally had to check out, and I haven't listened to them since at the beginning of COVID. And they
Yeah.
would have this is before anything happened, but in an hour of programming on All Things Considered, 50 minutes would be about COVID scare stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this is crazy. Isn't anything else happening in the world?
hmm
So I just thought they were a propaganda wing for the government
We
here.
get a sense that some of them are trying to regain like a middle of the road audience. Like again, on a Saturday afternoon, sometimes I'll have Sirius Radio on in my car, which I get free. Um, on CNN, I've had this weird string of going out for some church event on a Saturday afternoon and hearing like secrets disclosed about like the efficacy of mass on a Saturday afternoon, like some really brilliant doctor about a little more truth on things in the Middle East, but it's few and far between,
Few and
and
far between, and
yep,
it's, I mean, whoops, uh, they'll throw a they'll throw a few truths in there, so so you in
yeah,
hopes
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
believe the
yeah,
lies, right?
hmm yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I can't, I don't consume any mainstream news, not for, I never really did, but
yeah,
especially after the last mainstream news that I would consume on a regular basis was NPR, and it
yeah.
has gone for about
I
five
was
years.
talking to a friend this morning who listens to the podcast, Dr. Steve Sprecher, who's brilliant soil scientist, but he if you're not as familiar with online or if you don't have access to a library, he'll still check out the Wall Street Journal because at least they disagree with some consensus stuff. But again, like I think of my dad who's 90, and I don't he's not really on a computer. We would praise him for that, but he has nowhere else to turn to. I think he would find the things I think like really, really crazy, you know. But a
Well,
lot of it is just the only media they get, you know.
yeah, it's true. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, and that's kind of the blessing, I think, of Twitter for other problems people might have with it. At least it's been once it was freed up when Elon Musk owned it.
Yeah,
Then you could find out what was going on.
yeah.
Because before that, and that's the reason I got on Twitter in the first place,
Yeah, I was
is
on
because
Twitter
Europe
before
was
you.
having
I
all
don't
these
use it
protests,
well. Yeah, I like it.
and Twitter, well, both between Europe and Canada when they had those protests, like the
Yeah,
truckers, if you were to turn to American mainstream news sources, you wouldn't hear a thing about it.
No. It all
And I
went
want to know
down.
what the
It
hell is
all
going
went
on.
down. Censorship in a major way. Yeah, David
And
Cayley
then,
said the
yeah,
whole CBC gave like 13 seconds on a bridge with some, family from Saudi Arabia that was there visiting or something was their whole coverage.
yeah,
Uh, Crazy time, crazy time.
yeah,
What are
it's
you
crazy.
doing between now and the big day, Christmas Day?
Uh, Try to maybe go hunting one more time.
Good.
Uh, uh what do I have to do? I have to go out and give Bonnie a gift. I always put it off to the last minute.
Okay.
And other than that, not much.
This cold weather has been kind of nice, right? A good winter vibe.
Yeah, it's been nice. Well, actually, it's
It
been,
has been in its own way. It's been nice being outside. It's been very, very cold, but we'll probably
yeah,
have a white Christmas here. And my daughter and her husband, son-in-law, they're driving up from South Carolina. Another daughter went down to South Carolina, a different part, to visit her in-laws, and will be coming back after Christmas. We have Aiden is living nearby, and Peter Courage and our grandson James Courage are down in Columbus with Abby, their mother, and going to see in-laws. My brother's coming out. What are you guys doing?
um, usually Christmas Day is kind of just family. I mean,
Yeah,
our kids.
it's nice. Mhm.
But the day after Christmas, Bonnie's family comes over,
Yeah,
and then we'll have kind of a big thing on 12th night.
very cool. Right. Will our poet friend come over? German scholar. Why am I forgetting his name? I know him so
Oh,
well.
Daniel?
Daniel. I was going to
No,
say
Daniel's
Dandrew
in San
Andrew. Yeah.
Francisco, so he won't be. I don't think he's
Not Daniel
coming.
Polikoff. No, your godson. And why am I forgetting
Oh,
his name?
Jonathan. Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I gotta give him a call and see if he.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Tell Jonathan if you see him, I said hi.
Jonathan and Katie Hartsock, his wife.
Yeah, and I got to apologize to Tara, Dr. Matt Cooner, Guido, and this guy Jason Horsley. We're trying to set up times. I put some of a kibosh on my schedule is usually, as you know, like 5:30 at night or
Yeah.
sometimes Saturday morning. But we got to start getting these guests on, and they'll take place. Grateful
Yep.
to all of our listeners who send their comments and their questions and everything. I got to do some of this work on T-shirts. People have written, and it wouldn't be too much work. My daughter Lucy can kind of put them together. Um,
Okay.
and we're going to link to your Substack because you mentioned your one on education. We'll continue to link to your Substack
Okay.
and things.
All
What
right.
else are you promoting, my friend?
I don't. I'm thinking. Actually, people, let me know what you think. I'm thinking in the new year about trying to get some money together to do a recording. Me play songs I've written.
I donate.
And so I'm just wondering if I should take. I mean, it probably wouldn't be too insane, but I don't have the dough myself. But that would be
Uh-huh.
a nice. That would be a nice. That's kind of a dream project I have right now.
All right. Well, start planting seeds here. Like you're going to do. Would you do like a GoFundMe or something? Or
Yeah, I would do a GoFundMe or
okay,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I hope we promote it.
Okay.
I can be the first donation. All right. Well, Merry Christmas. We might even try and gather. I'll call you about your schedule. Maybe gather for
Okay.
another. We'll get a guest on. Merry Christmas to all and to all a good night. Thanks for listening to the Regeneration Podcast.